This is Defacto Review, where we run down the top news events from the previous week, and then we discuss what happens next. Hi, I'm Terrence Edwards. Our host, Jargal Defacto, is out this week, but we have our guest host, Bajro Bontoy Munkto. Hi, Mogi, how are you doing?
Very good, Terry.
Did you have a good week?
Pretty good week, yes.
A lot of events going on.
Not exciting Mongolia.
International media is definitely paying attention to Mongolia this week, I think.
Well, for bad circumstances, but any kind of international attention we get, I think it's good.
Yeah, so let's look at what we have to discuss this evening. The Bank of Mongolia raised its benchmark interest rates by 4.5 percentage points to 50% in a bid to stabilize the free-falling Tugrik. The new finance minister, Baktatok Choijilsurin, warned the nation last week that the government would struggle to pay wages, prompting a collapse in Mongolia's sovereign bonds. Analysts say the current crisis was a result of the previous government's attempt to reverse the decline in foreign investment through debt and fiscal expansion. So, Mogi, could you take us step by step? What was the immediate impact of this raise to the policy rate from the central bank?
Any country's central bank's policy rate is a very important tool that the government has to control the money supply in the market. And there was especially after Tugrik rate has been falling for the past 4 years, let's say, from a high of 1300s in 2011.
I think it was even 1280 around there.
At the peak of Mongolia's boom, and it has been somewhat falling for the past 4 years. And in the last couple of weeks, especially after the finance minister's statement, there has been a rush towards converting. If before it was just the corporations and corporate entities exchanging into USDs. After the finance minister's statement, I think ordinary individuals started running to the banks and trying to convert their last savings into USDs. And that really prompted limits on exchanges, daily exchanges, and the last
from the commercial banks.
Yes. So the last I've heard, it was a daily limit of 2.5 million Tugriks to convert into USDs. So that's generally for individuals, and for corporations as well. There has been a daily limit on how much money they can convert to USDs. So after the finance minister's statement, it was very important to protect the Tugrik from falling even further. So the central bank, I think, had no choice but to increase the policy rate. As far as the amount they increased, it could be debatable, of course, because we only need see the real results after a year or two. These policy rates always take time to take effect in the real economy. So despite interest rates, inflation being at somewhat recent record lows, the central bank had no choice, I think, to increase rates. And obviously, immediate impact would be psychological. Just last Friday, the Tugrik rose against the USD for the first time in almost 30 days, somewhat halting the fall of the Tugrik finally, but we'll see how much, again, it might affect the exchange rate next Monday. I think raising it to 15% is only a temporary short-term fix. People might still want to convert it into USD, so let's see how it affects, at least psychologically, how it affects individuals and companies.
So that's how we're looking at it from back here at home. I think one of the best gauges of what foreign investors are thinking about the country is the sovereign bonds that have been issued since 2012. What changes have you seen on that side?
I haven't looked at the bonds yet, but I believe they prices rose slightly after the interest rate was hiked, and that's obviously, again, psychological. It's just a measure of bond investors at least applauding the tough decisions that the government and the central bank is doing. Obviously, there needs to be much more to be done, especially on attracting foreign investment. So raising policy rates is, for people who might not know, understand, any country's central bank's policy rate is, the central bank acts as a bank of the banks. So in a way, how individuals and corporations put their money in banks, commercial banks put their own money in central banks in the form of central bank bills. So 15% is a percentage interest rate that the central bank pays the commercial banks for having their money deposited in the central bank. So Friday, the central bank does 3 times on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They had their 1-week bill auctions. So looking at that number, the actual outstanding total central bank 1-week bills, central bank bills, has dropped on Friday. So the effect hasn't been felt. Banks have not been. It's only been a day since the central bank obviously raised their hikes. So it's important to see how much 1-week bills is sold on Monday.
Yeah.
So that will give you an indication if the bank decision was correct. And obviously this decision was done so that the central bank shores up excess Tugriks in their own accounts. So there's less Tugriks in the market to be converted into USD. So in a way that affects how it affects the exchange rates.
Yeah, and when you look at savings, some years ago, we saw the Tugrik actually appreciating, and interest rates were quite high, about 13% 4 years ago. So looking at it now, do you expect savings to be increased, or does it make sense if you expect the Tugrik to continue to depreciate? It would actually be a negative interest rate, perhaps.
Yes, 15% is obviously the historic high. It's all designed so that banks stop lending money to the market, to corporations and even individuals, and that's how they increase the overall money supply in the market. So money supply, what's called the M2 money, is the amount of money that's in the market, that's in people's
circulating,
hands, that's in corporations' hands, that's in bank deposits, overall money that's being circulated in the economy. And just this July, it was total money supply in the market was 11.3 trillion Tugriks.
Okay.
And that's an increase of 63% from same time 4 years ago. So that just tells you how much the central bank printed money.
Yeah.
Obviously, money supply is something that the central bank decides on. If they want more money in the market, they print money.
Yeah.
If they want less money in the market, say, buy back whatever banks took out of the 1-week bills, and then take them out of the market. So that's how the central bank controls it. So, this is in a way for the central banks to start decreasing the money supply in the market. Their understanding is that there's too much Tugrik in the market now, and raising interest rates will try to decrease that.
So too much Tugrik, let's take some of it back.
Exactly.
All right. Moving on, but sticking with the economy. The International Monetary Fund lauded the new government's candid remarks about the economic crisis during their first visit by the international organization since the election of a new government under the lead of the Mongolian People's Party. This week, 1.4% GDP growth for the first half of the year was announced as a new government faces growing debt and a sliding valuation of the Tugrik. In a meeting with the Prime Minister, Jargal Tolga Erdogan, representatives of the IMF advised that the new government was making a good start to its first weeks of rule and applauded public comments about the economic reality the government is facing. So there's a lot of speculation of why the IMF would come in town now. Their official answer was they were here to meet the new administration, though I wonder how many new governments were elected into office this summer and how many were actually visited. Do you think it was purely political or there was some dealings in the background?
IMF has a resident office here, so they keep an eye on everything. I think by being a member of IMF, the government is obligated to share all of their numbers with IMF, even those that they don't publicly announce.
Sure.
So I think, I think it's partly true that it's a regular thing that they come and meet the new government, the new prime minister. I think it's a regular. In that part, I think it's true, but it's also they have a double reason for coming here. They want to see how the new government is dealing with the economy. Obviously, it's no secret that we're going through some tough times, and I think looks like we'll continue to have even more tough times for some foreseeable, at least year or two. One thing I wanted to mention about the IMF is that last time we took out a standby agreement with IMF was in 2009, right during the global financial crisis. During that time, what IMF usually demands from a country when they come in and help them out is three basic things: raise interest rates because the exchange is falling.
We just did that.
Cut the budget significantly and reduce budget deficit.
We're in the process of that. I don't know if they've hit
to
any benchmarks, though.
We're about to. The government will introduce at the end of the month. They said they will introduce a bill to the parliament and ask for an extraordinary session to be convened. So we're in the midst of doing that. And the third thing that the IMF usually demands when they come in is to increase foreign investment. So in this front, we haven't done anything significant, but at least what the Prime Minister has said is that the first full cabinet meeting that they've had convened, the Prime Minister told the ministers to focus on investment, not on taking more debt. So in a way, that's telling you that the whole cabinet is focused on increasing investment, whether it's domestic or foreign. But in these situations, it's foreign investment that's the most important factor in how Mongolia comes out of this crisis sooner. So in these three fronts, at least we're doing something. And what I'm trying to say is that before IMF, whether we are not, we'll take out a standby agreement or not, we're already doing the things that IMF demands.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say, while we're doing this, why not take out a free money basically from the IMF and use that to, we won't be able to equalize the budget. That's going to be difficult when we have a 2 trillion Tugrik deficit in the first 7 months, and the finance minister said, well, it's going to be 5.1 trillion at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So we won't be able to equalize it or make it zero budget deficit, but we will have to make significant cuts. But whatever we don't manage to cut, I think free money from the IMF could help us out in this time, because you're already doing the things that IMF usually demands.
Yeah. The only thing that we don't know is if the IMF would ask them to go even further than they're planning.
Yes. So IMF already indicated that they're ready to fly back to Mongolia with a full team of experts. And Erdogan, like you said, hasn't denied that they won't take out an IMF sign a standby agreement. So what I'm hoping is that these are all things that the government is doing so that IMF coming in won't start making outright major changes that might not be popular with the people. So I think it's a step-by-step approach so that people are also ready, understand that IMF is truly what's needed. Finance minister published some very difficult numbers, even projections of things to get worse. So I think it's a step-by-step approach to sort of get the ordinary people to understand that dire decisions need to be made, and one of them could be IMF.
What are some of the other options we have on the table? Well, Mongolia has.
I think it's going to be very tough. I mean, IMF would be the easiest thing for us to do. I'd say easiest because standby agreement forces tough decisions. The only option is perhaps really I don't see any maybe bilateral maybe soft loans, but I think in this situation it won't be less popular than taking out a loan from IMF, because IMF is a multilateral. Many countries are involved in it, but if there's bilateral soft loans, what country, maybe China or maybe Japan might be ready, but I don't think that won't be enough to help the recovery, the economy.
Do you think they could tap into the bond market?
Bond market, I think we have no chance of tapping into that market again. We still have an outstanding Eurobond program that we can tap into, but as you've noticed, in May we issued 500 million bonds that were 11%, 12% interest rates. So at this point, I think with this, after we've announced this much of a budget deficit, I think this time will be much higher interest rate, and I think that won't be helpful at all.
Okay, we're going to leave it there and move on. Not even the president will be spared from the pay cuts to high-ranking public officials. As the government looks for cost savings amid growing debt and a falling exchange rate of the Tugrik. The president, prime minister, MPs will receive 30% pay cuts, said Finance Minister Defacto Tugrik on 13th of August, following his statement last week where he painted a dire picture for the economy. Prime Minister Jargal Tolga Erdogan and the Finance Minister have told reporters that they will save on public expenditures with these cuts. With high-ranking officials that aren't the MPs, the President and the Prime Minister, they will be cut by 20%. The heads of state-owned companies will have some margin between 30 and 60% pay cuts to their salary. So what do you think this sends to investors abroad?
This is really a symbolic gesture, because these are not aimed to decrease the budget deficit. From what they announced this year, by these wage cuts, they'll save 3 billion Tugriks this year and 8 billion next year. So full year, they'll save only 8 billion, while our deficit is supposedly projected to be 5.1 trillion.
Yeah.
So
it's a small drop.
How much does 8 billion affect our budget deficit? So this is a purely symbolic gesture, so that they're telling the people, they're telling the investors, they're telling businesses that we've all sharing the pain, and we're all taking a pay cut. So in a way, symbolic gesture saying that businesses should all move into sort of a saving mode where state-owned companies cannot invest more in use the state budget to take out any executing projects, or take out any foreign trips, or buy even furniture. So this is a larger symbolic gesture, and that's what it is, just symbolic.
So one of the insidious sides of paying government workers low is it increases the temptation to take bribes, under-the-table deals. Do you think this might exacerbate any problems Mongolia already has?
Obviously, it'll put some suspicion on how public officials, at least the high-ranking public officials. So I'm a little happy that it's only high-ranking officials. usually Mongolian high-ranking officials already have a business on the side or have a sponsor, so they won't get hurt at all by this. So this is purely, like I said, symbolic gesture.
Middle income or
yeah, mid-level.
Mid-level bureaucrats won't be affected.
Won't be affected by this. So most of the corruption, supposed or alleged corruption, goes on in the lower and mid-levels. So
yeah,
and already, like I said, the high-ranking officials, they already are millionaires in their own right accounts, looking at their annual public income and asset statements. So they're already millionaires. Most of them are. So they won't be really affected. Their lives won't take even a dip at all from this.
Okay. Well, we'll be watching. Finally, our final topic for the evening. An administrative court in Ulaanbaatar has ruled in favor of a member of the family of the figure credited with Mongolia's independence from China in 1921 to change the title of Chinggis Square back to Sukhbaatar Square. A member of Sukhbaatar's lineage, Z. Haidar, contested the decision by former Mayor Erdem Battle of the Democratic Party to change the name from Sukhbaatar in 2013, as the government was then making steps to walk away from the Soviet socialist past. D. Sukhbaatar is a war hero remembered for his role in allying Mongolia with Russia to expel Chinese occupiers under the Manchu Empire. So the cultural significance is what I'm most interested in here.
Right.
What does this mean from that perspective?
For most of the population, the square has always been Sukhbaatar Square.
I think a lot of people never noticed it changed names.
Yeah, and I think it was only in public or official documents or official, let's say, news programs, they used Chinggis. It has a full name, Great Mongol Chinggis Khan Square.
Okay.
Great Mongol leader Chinggis Khan Square.
That's
the full name
mouthful.
is very, but obviously these things are, any kind of name change that's it's the only thing you knew, and changing it to Chinggis Square. Obviously, at the time, it was drew a lot of criticism. But just as when people were just as getting used to it, they switched it back to Sukhbaatar. So my personal view is that it's always been Sukhbaatar Square. There was nothing. It's not like it was Chinggis Square before, and then communism happened, and then it was renamed Sukhbaatar Square. And then, in that sense, in that situation, it might have been a little different. People might have been divided, but it's always been Sukhbaatar Square from the very beginning. And to me, Mongolia has enough Chinggises already. I think we've used our Chinggis Khan's name too much, overused it. There's Chinggis vodkas, Chinggis beers, Chinggis
City,
Chinggis cities, Chinggis airports, Chinggis everything. So.
Yeah.
Historians.
And there's more modern role models to look to.
Historians and anthropologists might say, obviously they are not happy with Chinggis names being used too much on especially on vodkas and beers. But and this is just an example of how Mongolian politics can be silly, and it's as if Mongolian People's Party owns outright the name Sukhbaatar, and then DP is trying to outright take possession of the name Chinggis. So it's like two major political parties fighting over the ideology or the history or the cultural direction of the country by taking over some very historic, very symbolic, very significant names. And Sukhbaatar has played a very important role in liberating, as you said, Mongolia from China in 1921.
Yeah.
And these both historic individuals should be celebrated by the whole entire population. And this square is an example of how Mongolian politics can be very dividing. They're even dividing up our history in a way, where both are important, significant historic figures, but one seems to be defending one, or one prefers one over the other. So it's just very, very silly politics for me. And I'm sort of happy that it's back to Sukhbaatar Square.
Sure.
There's enough Chinggises. There's already a Chinggis statue in front of the square, so
Yeah.
why make it everything? Let's just name all of our babies Chinggis, all of our food Chinggis, all of our cities Chinggis, and it's just silly, very silly to me.
I think for battle, it was more, so yeah, they might be drawing lines and this hero belongs to us, that hero belongs to us. But for battle, he also took down the Lenin statue, replaced it with a Marco Polo statue. The choice of role models seems to be, it comes from that 13th century period, but it's more of a choice of who shows strengths in entrepreneurialism, the aspects of Mongolia history that they think are best to model after today, because Marco Polo, also being an Italian guy, was also a trader and a merchant. That he does represent a lot of that Silk Road, that trade between Asia, Eurasia, and Europe.
Well, this our fight over naming rights over the square is also very much involved with Mongolia's national identity. Before 1990, we've had some kind of an ideology of how the country should move forward. Becoming the best model socialist citizen was taught from kindergarten all the way up to death. But 1990 happened. It was sort of a free-for-all system. Truly the Wild Wild West kind of system where everyone was out for their own. If you were doing good, you were a good citizen of a democratic country. So, but we're realizing that democracy sort of lacks a national identity kind of a figure.
Yeah.
So the earliest, the latest thing we can find was Chinggis.
Yeah. But
that individual was 700, 800 years ago. So Mongolia needs to find its own national identity and model, not someone who's 700 years old. Yes, we need to celebrate Chinggis Khan, but we need to find something that unifies our population together. And this is just an example of Mongolia's struggle to find that national identity.
Yeah, it's only been 20 years. It really is a different history now. I think the best example you can point to now would probably be Zorig. He's been lionized. The swallow of democracy is his title, yeah?
Right.
Or his nickname.
Right.
So I think Mongolia will continue to look for people like that.
It's an ongoing sort of search for your own identity. And maybe perhaps 26 years is not long enough to find that, but it sort of tells you that we need to keep searching and keep searching hard.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's our program for the evening. We hope our briefings give you a heads up as you enter the new week. Any final thoughts, Mogi?
I'm just a little sad about Olympics. Last week.
2 medals.
2 medals. Looks like that's the end of it, and people are disappointed. The last time we won, 5 medals,
yeah.
and
2 is pretty respectable for a country of 3 million people, I think.
I think we sort of had too much high of expectation, and I think that's good. Raising the bar, raising the level of expectation from our sportsmen is good. But it just tells you that we raised the bar, but we need to catch up with that bar again. So I think that's good overall for the long-term future of Mongolian sports.
Well, I'll be sad to see you go. It's been a good 2 weeks with you. Our usual host, Jarg, will be back, but you will be remembered by us, I think our viewers as well, and you're always welcome.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for having me cover for Jargal. It's obviously very tough shoes to fill.
Well, you did just fine.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. All right, that's our show for the evening. Good night, Ulaanbaatar.
Good night.